Hello everybody, Marlo Ellis coming to you live here on the Uncommon Woman page for the 12 days of divine inspiration. First of all, I want to apologize for being a little bit late. I had to jump off because for some reason the video wasn't working correctly. So this is part of what happens when we do these lives. We just have to go with the flow. Anyway, so first of all, if you are new to the Uncommon Woman page, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This is an incredible community of women who have beautiful stories of strength from struggle, women who are really looking to step into their personal strength and possibly share their healing journey with others as they heal themselves. So that is really what the Uncommon Woman is all about, and you will be able to find us here on this Facebook page as well as on Instagram at the Uncommon Woman. And we have lots of exciting things happening in 2019. You'll notice now on the Facebook cover above that the dates for Eastern Canada have been announced for the Uncommon Woman Cross Country Tour. And if you go ahead right now and go to theuncommonwoman.com, you'll actually get a VIP ticket at an early bird price for $99, which is the general admission. So if you love this Facebook Live this evening, and if what we do on here resonates with you, and if you're one of those people that actually is cool with having difficult conversations with people, and if you find that that's a place where you're comfortable, or maybe you're uncomfortable there, but you know that you need to have those conversations. Hi, Crystal. Thank you, Goddess, for being here. Then I really encourage you to check out the Uncommon Woman Cross Country Tour in 2019. So tonight I'm really excited because I'm bringing on a very special human being, my brother Roy Ellis. Roy is a grief counselor in the Halifax area, and he's been doing this work for many years, and he is skilled, and he is actually what I would consider to be one of my personal mentors, and he is so wise and has so much life experience as well as work experience in the area of grief. And so the goal this evening is to bring Roy in and have a really powerful conversation about the dark night of the soul. And it is a really difficult time of year to be feeling not so festive, not so joyful, right? And of course, it's really common for people to be struggling over the holidays. And so I did a Facebook Live on Saturday morning at 11 Eastern Standard, this past Saturday, with Shannon Miller. And she and I talked about what it's like to be in your grief during the holidays and how you can kind of manage that and go through that with grace and be able to really honor your own feelings. And Roy and I are going to be doing something similar, except we're going to be talking more about the dark night of the soul. So I'm just waiting for Roy to pop on. So maybe I'll message him and see where he is, because I don't see him on, and I want to make sure that he's... Hi, Wanda. You guys, thank you so much for being here. So I'm just making sure that Roy is in the right place. I'm pretty sure he knows to be here on the Uncommon Woman page with us. So I just want to make sure that that he jumps on. So for those of you who are new to the Uncommon Woman community, make sure that you like this page and that you actually go into the settings and see first. That way you'll actually get all the notifications. There he is. Hi, Roy. Hi, Deanna. So make sure that when you come onto the Uncommon Woman page, if you're interested in getting all of the notifications for the 12 Days of Divine Inspiration, which is the video series, that you hit see first in the settings when you follow, and then that way whenever one of the videos comes up or whenever there's a post, you get a notification so you don't miss anything, because you certainly don't want to be missing these incredible videos that I will be doing. They're really conversations. I'm not an interviewer as much as I'm just a conversationalist. I love to have powerful conversations with people who I admire. So I'm going to invite Roy in because I see he's here. And while I'm inviting Roy in, I know that it would be really powerful if you would share this video, this conversation out to your community, because really, the most powerful way to get these messages out is to share them out to the communities and to your people, right? And so we want to get as many people into this conversation this evening, because I know myself, just in the Uncommon Woman community solo, that there are so many people who are struggling in their grief, and they're really having a hard time getting into the Christmas spirit, so to speak. And so this conversation will be a really powerful conversation for those people. So make sure that you share this out to your community. We're trying to bring Roy in right now. So I don't know what's happening here. For some reason, he and I are struggling to get on. It says we're adding him. So let's just give it a minute and see what happens. You have to have a pretty strong Wi-Fi connection, but I do know that at the moment, I'm the only one here. So let's see. We're waiting for you, Roy. We'll wait. We'll wait patiently. And everybody who is here can be adding their friends, bringing people in. Awesome. So Deanna just tagged her girlfriend. So that's a super good way to do that. If you want to just tag somebody who you know is struggling right now, that's an incredible way to get people onto this Facebook Live, right? In the meantime, I'm going to shut my Wi-Fi off just so that I'm sure that it's not my issue. Roy, I'm going to see if I can add you again. Okay. Allow your viewers, sir. Okay. Roy, if you're on, can you try asking to come in? Can you request to be added? Let's try that. Okay. And see if that works. Sorry. Sometimes these things are real funky. I don't know what's going on, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So yeah, if you have any friends or family members, anybody that, even a private Facebook group, maybe you have a Facebook group that you run or that you're admin for that you think would really benefit from this conversation, please share it over. And in the meantime, I'm just going to keep chatting until Roy gets here. So Roy and I have done several Facebook Lives together. We have certainly, okay, here we go. He's now requesting. So I'm going to approve and see how that works. Sometimes we just got to do things different. We just got to back up the bus. Now, if this doesn't work, then we might have to do something different. I don't know why it's not working. We're waiting. It's saying that it's adding him, but it's not letting him come in for some reason, which is really, really bizarre. I guess the other option is to go and come back in and start over. Why don't we do that? Hi, Elaine. Thank you guys so much for being here. Roy and I are trying really hard to get him on, and I don't know what the issue is. Okay, I'm going to X him out, and then I'm going to add him back in. Roy, let's try this one more time and see. Do you have your camera turned and all of the things? I don't know why. Oh, there. Yes.
Ooh, that took me a little bit. That was tricky. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It happens. No worries. I'm glad that you're here. I was just about to jump off and jump back on, but we made it.
I made it. Sorry. Peace, everybody.
Peace, everybody. Okay, so really quickly, for those of you who are on right now, I would love, love, love it, and I know Roy would appreciate it too, if you would share this broadcast over to anybody in your community who's struggling tonight, tomorrow, has had a hard month, hard year, anybody who you think this message might resonate with. And the reason that we do that is because the more people that get these kinds of messages throughout the holidays, the better. It could be that they're not in my community and they're not in Roy's community. And if you share it over, then they'll see it. And the other thing is that you can also share this into a private message. So if you don't want to send it to somebody publicly, maybe they're having a difficult time and you know, but it's not public knowledge, then you can send this in a private Facebook message so that it's not like blasted all over social media. The goal is that we hit the right people, right, Roy? And that
let's hit them.
Whoever hears it and resonates with it, that's exactly who's supposed to hear it. So Roy, I want to thank you so much for coming on this evening. I love chatting with you. Of course, you know that you and I chat lots. Roy and I spend lots of time. Hi, Gord Ellis. Hi, Deanna.
Hey, Gord.
Thank you for being here. Our brother Gord's on here. Everybody say hi to Gord. So the Sibs are
He's
here.
my main source of grief, so it's appropriate that he's here.
Sibs in the house. So without further ado, because we took a minute to get started, Roy, I just want to thank you for being here. And I've just introduced you quickly and just said that you're a grief counselor in the Halifax area, but I would love it if you could share a little bit more of your experience with everybody here on this broadcast so that they know exactly what you do and why I called you in for this.
Okay. Well, it's good to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Marlo. It's always nice to be with you. I was actually trained as a chaplain. I'm also a therapist and a counselor. Worked a long time early on in mental health. Did about 10 years in mental health and acute care. And then for the last 10 years, I've been a grief counselor. I'm actually the bereavement coordinator with the palliative care service here in Halifax in the central region. We take care of about 1,500 deaths a year. I do counseling, family care, group work, a lot of education too, and as well I do some consulting all over the place with everything from the police force, the Department of Defense, to Threads of Life, an organization working with trauma. Work closely with Leah Parsons on suicide. So I have a lot of interests in all sorts of different areas of loss and grief, so that's a little bit about me.
Okay, well, wow, that's a little bit about him, you guys. It gives you an idea of what his breadth of expertise is. So I know that you and I were kind of trying to figure out what it was that we were going to chat about, and we can chat about anything anytime. So
sure.
I didn't feel like it had to be, kind of set.
If people have questions, they can just pipe in too, right?
Sure,
okay.
Absolutely. And actually, we encourage questions because this is a conversation. Roy and I are just kind of setting the foundation for you to come in and have a dialogue with us. But so, Roy, I really loved your video yesterday. And I also want to make sure that we direct people to Roy Ellis Grief and Grow, which is his Facebook, his public Facebook page. He's been doing daily videos, just little 3-4 minute videos around grief, and he's doing 25 of them between December 1st and December 25th. Yesterday you did a really great one about the dark night of the soul, and I loved it because I know that that's a little bit different than just grief, right? It kind of goes to a different place. So I thought maybe you and I could address that this evening, because not everybody is necessarily grieving the death of a loved one, but they're in that dark night of their soul for whatever reason. And I thought that might make this a little bit more broad. So for those of you who are on here, just know that this isn't just, right, Roy, for people who are grieving the loss of a loved one, the death of a loved one. This is far more expansive than that.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Anytime that you're experiencing a loss, whether it's a divorce, or issues with your job or unemployment, or you're having a crisis at home of any kind with kids or with finances, you can name it. Even your car, really having big issues with your car sometimes, Marlo.
Not anymore.
Yay. So the thing about oopsies coming into the holidays is that it just throws us in the face of that stuff, whatever our darkness is, or whatever our grief is and our sorrows and the sort of challenges that we have. There's something about December for me that accentuates that. So this year, as I was going into December, and as I knew I was going to do this 25-day thing, I thought, I'm going to really school myself again and go back. And I started to read this book again. I'm reading like a chapter a day by Thomas Moore. It's called Dark Nights of the Soul. There's another one called The Healing Through the Dark Emotions, which I'm also reading. Because I thought, what better during like the darkest frickin' month, right? To just really plumb the depths of like, what is darkness? What does it mean to go through these turbulent, terrible times when we just feel like we're falling apart, we're out of control, we're super vulnerable, and there's an instinct to either run away as fast as we can, right? And pretend it's not happening and just push that stuff down and repress it. Or on the other side, just to sort of like fall into it in despair, and just kind of go, this is hopeless and it's not going anywhere, and this is just awful, and there's nothing but awfulness in there. And so I'm really curious about that. As a therapist and as a grief counselor and just as a human being, I'm really curious about how we meet our darkest periods. So I thought December is, I think for all of us, I don't know about you, Marlo, but for me, December is always like the last chapter of a really long book.
Well, that's funny, but you and I are so different. Like, people think that we're similar, and we are in lots of ways, but we're also very different. I adore December. Like, I'm jacked because I'm so excited about.
I'm jacked too. Don't.
But it's not a painful time for me. I don't ruminate. Now, before we move further, I want you to say, because I know that people are like, what were those books? Can you please just share the 2 books that you're reading? And if you have a pen and you're interested in this stuff, write these down. 2 books that Roy's reading that he's going to refer to tonight are.
Tom. Well, I'm only going to really refer to one of them.
Okay, but you mentioned 2.
Yeah, there's one called Healing Through the Dark Emotions. I think her first. Sorry, I'm just blanking her name right now. But it's Miriam somewhere or other. I can get it at the end. And then the other one is Thomas More, Dark Nights of the Soul. He also wrote Care of the Soul, which is another great seminal work. Yeah, those are the 2 that I highly recommend.
Okay, because I know that the community here, they're big into books and podcasts and reading, and they love to be constantly kind of figuring it out. So I know that you've mentioned that book to me before to read, and I actually plan on reading that. Maybe I'll read that this month just to kind of be in alignment with what you're doing. But okay, so on that note, I'm quite sure that there are a lot of people here right now on this Facebook Live who are struggling in December and who feel like you. Some people it might be an anniversary of some sort. It could be that they just really struggle with the cold and the dark, short days. Yeah. So can you kind of get into that a little bit?
Well, first I want to say that, saying that it's the darkest month in some ways, I'm not saying that like I'm all bummed out during December all the time, but I am very aware as those days get short, that's psychologically, if we think about like the inner experience of being human, there's something going on, like bears hibernating and birds fly south and the earth freezes and the sky gets, cold and dark. And so there's something going on, whether or not we want to sort of admit that we feel it or not. I think a lot of people resist it. I think a lot of people.
Humanoids are the only ones that are stupid enough to stick around. Everybody else is like, I'm out of here.
Well, but it's not an accident, right? It's not an accident that in the heart of the darkness, like we have this festival of lights, right? With the birth of Christ and the stars in the sky. And when are we as a culture more shiny, sparkly, and glitzy than New Year's Eve and Christmas? So no matter how you look at it, no matter how you want to, if you feel it's a dark month or not, look what we do at winter solstice when we come to the dark day, the day with the fewest number of daylight hours.
Right.
So I think there's something to that, and for those people, especially, maybe not, but if you're in hardship, I think this month is the one. This is the one that people dread, and this is the one that they know you got everything against you. You got darkening days, you've got increasing cold and isolation driving us indoors, and then you have all these Christmas rituals and it's not Christmas, and we'll talk about this in a bit, but the sort of walk up to Christmas, Marlo, is always really difficult for people. A lot more difficult than Christmas is, just because of the memories that are made, the family rituals and habits, and if that person is not present anymore, there's just too many triggers and too many moments when we're going, okay, like this can't be good this year.
Right.
And depending on how profound your loss is and how profoundly sad you are, it can spiral you right down, I think, into what Thomas More calls a dark night of the soul.
Yeah, I think that I agree 100%. And I have a beautiful comment here by Teresa. Hi, Teresa. So Teresa says, my son was buried 33 years ago on Christmas Eve.
Right.
My daughter died 14 months ago. I search for the light and the beauty and the joy in December and at Christmas. It's so important to save space and to be close with those who make you feel safe and loved. So first of all, I just want to say, Teresa, our hearts are with you, and we're sending you lots of love right now. So I'm sure it's a difficult time for you. So Roy, I don't know if there's anything you want to say to Teresa, or just kind of in her comments, any thoughts or?
Well, I think that's great. I mean, I think that's ultimately, Teresa sounds like, but I bet if we heard Teresa's story, I bet that first Christmas was tough. And 33 years later, how lovely that she's able to meet the season of Christmas, we'd hope so, right? That eventually, and it's true that eventually people do sort of find their way to enjoy Christmas again and to feel their hearts opening again, and to feel like the season can be one of joy. But it takes a while, and the first Christmas especially, and that's sort of who I'm doing these videos for, is for people either who lost somebody in this past year or are actively losing somebody right now. So I think we do balance off, right? I think we do balance off. But if you're losing a father right now, or a mother, or a child, I guarantee you that you're not moving into the season. You're not moving into any season with any joy, but this one in particular,
Right.
Right.
So I think I'd like to just put this out there, and I often do this in the Facebook Lives, is if you are somebody who is caregiving, has recently lost somebody, in the last little while, and you'd like us to just kind of send you some love and have the people in the community send you love. If you would like to put a heart in the comments, you may. You don't have to. But I know that there are people in the community who love the support, and often you'll see in the feed that there are other people going through something too. And there's something about that creates community, and just to know that you're not in this alone. So feel free to give us a heart, even if you would like to just let us know. And then maybe Roy and I can address you in a little bit. So Roy, I wanted to ask you some questions about the dark night of the soul. And I know that one of the things that, you have spoken about before, and I think that you mentioned it yesterday, but I'm not quite sure. It could have just been in a different conversation, was that I know that you want to specifically talk to people who are grieving, people who have lost somebody, but there are people who might be going through, for example, the first Christmas without a partner. Maybe there's been a really nasty divorce, families split apart, and they feel like it's been a death. I know it's not the same. I mean,
It's very much the same. Very much. It's very much the same, Marlo.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Sure.
I just don't want to make a declaration that I don't know about. So
no, I think divorce would be an example of something very close to death. It's kind of a living death, right? Where you're.
I think so. Deanna just said, "What about divorce or separation? They're grieving too, right? Yeah. How can you speak to them?" Okay, so we're on it.
Right. Well, I mean, I think in some ways the same issues apply, and in some ways, like a divorce is in some ways it has its own kind of excruciating flavor, because with divorce it's not just that. With death, the person has died. There's been something has happened with their body, right? I mean, that's typically what happens. Something goes wrong with the body of the beloved. Even if it's an ambivalent relationship, it's about a bodily failure. The body does not thrive anymore. For some reason or other, it ceases to be able to be on a trajectory of life, and eventually it dies. In a divorce, it's not about the body, right? It's about our failure to be able to navigate love in a relationship. Or to be loved, or to love. And those struggles are really excruciating in a way that grief by death isn't. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other factors. Yeah, but you know what? Like losing someone while they're still alive, having them say, "I don't want to be with you anymore," as opposed to, "Sorry, I can't be with you anymore. I'm dying," as opposed to, "I don't want to be with you anymore." There's something about that that's, even if it's for the best, and hopefully, we hope that all divorces are for the best, but we also know that divorces are really hard on kids, right?
Right.
All the research suggests that kids in divorces have a harder time than kids in permanent relationships. So we know that divorces are hard on kids, and therefore they're hard on parents, because parents know that they're hard on kids. So there is nothing pretty about that. And I think as you move through the first holidays, again, talking about, it's usually this first experience of the holidays without, but it can go on. I just think there's something particularly acute and bitter about the holidays. How we go through it, I mean, how we navigate that is very personal, right? It really depends on our strengths. It depends on our coping, Marlo. It depends on how we deal with challenges, and with disappointments, and with heartbreak, right? Like how we've learned to cope, and how we choose to meet our darkest hours, and how we deal with disassembling and vulnerability.
Oh, I like that word.
right? And
Disassembling. That's a great word.
right,
It
and
kind of reminds me
shattering
of
is the word.
Shannon Miller talks about shattered, right? Like
Yes.
that's the word that she uses when she talks about the death of Katie. And I feel like disassembling is the same kind of thing. It's just like you just kind of everything just kind of
Yeah,
falls to this, like just falls in a messy way, right?
that's exactly right. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what the dark night of the soul is about. It's
Okay.
not about cohesion. Cohesion is you have spirit and soul in a way. Moore talks about these two things, and spirit is very masculine. It's very together. It's very organized, brightly lit, and it's in the heavens, and we feel strong and ego. We're ego bound and we're rational and everything's good. And then there's the dark feminine, which is chaotic and deep, where everything falls apart, and it is not at all that sort of Western.
It's the emotional side, right? It's the
Well, yeah,
emotional.
exactly. And so
Right.
in that dark place, things fall apart. They don't come together. They
Right.
don't come together. Things come together at the mountaintop and fall apart in the cave.
Mm.
And so being in that place while everything's falling apart around you, where things are uncertain, this is where we're tested. This is where our deepest parts are tested. Our deepest core values encounter reality. Because as I like to say, we don't grow. We don't change on the beach drinking Coronas. You know, like that's not where change happens. That's where
No,
good
I'm just
times
joking.
happen. I know. Really good times.
I think
We
I've
can,
actually had that happen. No,
well, I think we can have like ascendant moments,
right.
right? We feel, we feel like completely connected in those moments, but we don't necessarily grow. But we can have deep moments of connection and joy. But growth, in other words, it tests our mettle. And I think that's what divorce or death, or radical failures at being human, like alcoholism. And these days, there's lots of these shamings, and with the Me Too movement, and men being found as being
Like
assaulting
sexual
women,
deviance or
and their lives is crashing down around their feet. Thank God. And here they are. They have to face this darkness inside and make sense of it. I
right.
mean, that's the kind of worst case scenario right there. But I think, most of us, I think, are just struggling to make meaning and to not just run away from those hard places.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was in the dark night of my soul, which was back in like 2011, 2012. And it was the first time I'd ever been in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just really, I mean, for somebody who I felt I was so stable, and I felt that I had such an incredible support system around me and all of those things, I still felt like I had no control. And that's one of the things that I really struggled with as somebody who kind of had always felt somewhat in control, is I felt completely out of control. And I, even to the point of not really being able to control my emotions. Like I couldn't necessarily control my responses or the things that I would say. Like I just felt like I was in a different body, a different shell. And
That's exactly right.
that's how I knew that
Exactly
something
right.
was wrong. That nothing about me I recognized, except from the outside. And I think this was an important fact, now that I'm just thinking about it, is that from the outside, so many people thought because I looked the same, that everything was the same. I was just having a bad day. But if they
Mm-hmm.
would have seen me through my eyes, nothing about me was the same. And
That's
even
great.
when I looked in the mirror, I didn't look the same. Isn't that
Right.
weird? So
I think that's it. I think that's exactly what we're talking about. And you use the word wrong, and I think that's the word that a lot of people use to describe being in that place. And we immediately sort of attach a moral significance to it, like this is wrong, and being on the beach drinking Coronas is right, right?
right. Because nobody tells you it's right. Nobody tells
Nobody
you it's
does.
okay.
No one tells you anything about growing. No one tells you anything about encountering,
No.
devastation,
Right.
right?
Right.
True devastation. Whether or not it's literal devastation, we know that people get devastated. I think a divorce can be a devastating thing. I don't think I've met anyone who's had a bad divorce who would have said that word didn't apply.
Right.
Not every death is devastating, but some are.
Yeah.
But it's that being in this place of devastation and not finding it wrong or other or somehow not us. And you're right, Marlo, to say that our bodies feel different, our identities feel different, and and it's really important to understand that we really do become a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not the same person, and we don't have to be. And this is what shakes us up because we're very comfortable with our together face. We're very comfortable when we have like the clothes on, we got the right haircut, and we're saying the right things, and we're appearing, our image is appearing. But man, when we fall apart, even if we sort of appear, as you said, like if the mask is still on, there's something going on inside, and that's when we want to start to both be able to slow down a little bit, to reflect a little bit, and say, what is being spoken in me? Like, what is this? Who is this that I'm meeting?
Right.
And
right.
what does it mean?
Right.
And I think that grief is transformative like that. I think divorce is transformative like that. I think pet loss can be transformative like that. And any kind of like
a career loss. It's like
career
really
loss.
Yeah.
Not
I
even
had
like,
an interesting
broken hearts.
Yeah, for sure. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody about a month ago, and a retired gentleman, and he and I were talking about his retirement, and I said, "Oh, you must be so excited because you have all of this time to do all of this stuff." And I think the conversation started because he had this new backpack with him, and it was like really flashy. And I said, "Wow, this must be so exciting for you." And he said, "Actually, I've had to rediscover everything about myself, including what I wear." And he said, "So I went out and bought a backpack." And he's still navigating. And he said, "I really don't know what to do with myself most of the time." And I said to him, "Wow, that is amazing," because people talk about retirement. I mean, we're not talking about retirement tonight, but just an example. People talk about retirement like it's this great thing, which it can be, but it can also be a crisis, an identity crisis, right? So that grief, we're just talking about different layers of grief and that dark night of soul, and crazy. But I mean, you hear about people who retire and have a heart attack and die 2 months later, or they lose themselves, and they must be in the dark night of the soul in their own way, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I love this example of this guy, like, buying a new backpack to have to sort of remake our identity. And this is part of the gift of the darkness, and of these places of devastation, is the way that they sort of unmake us, and then from that unmade place we begin the process of remaking. And so it's a kind of a clearing the decks. And we all know, I mean, all of us know that clearing stuff out of your house every so often, but every 5 years, is clearing out the clutter. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
And we don't recognize these dark places as being actually places of clearing, and like forest fires that sweep through to make new life. Because while we're in them, right, we don't get it, that the blueberries will come like as soon as the fire is done, right?
Totally. What's funny is I just thought of, after I went through my crisis, I cut my hair, and I just realized that was part of my awakening, was that I completely changed my identity. Like, I had long brown hair most of my life, and I cut it super short, dyed it blonde, and talk about cleaning the decks. And I had this new persona that needed to be part of the new version of myself, because the old version of myself was gone.
That is beautiful. And Marlo, I'm always astounded when I look at pictures of us as a family, and I can actually see that partition. Like, I always forget. I look back and I see those pictures of you sometimes, and I'm like, I don't even remember that girl.
Totally different person.
Totally so it is very interesting, and I would say that would be a great example of the transformative sort of like the sort of kind of washing away and washing through of the dark night of being, when we're sort of pushed right down to the bottom. And in that place too, Thomas More talks about this in his book too. He says, down there in that place, the point is that there's no light. You can't really bring light to it. It's a basement, and maybe you got a match, and maybe you have a torch, and maybe there's a line. If you think about those kids that were stuck in that cave in Thailand, there's a great example, right? Like, these guys, with all our modern technology, right? We can go to the moon, but we had to go into a cave with flashlights.
Right.
That's all we could do. Like in a cave, nothing works but basically, the most basic stuff. So, right. And then you can illuminate the whole thing. You can only illuminate a little bit of what's in front of you. And it's dangerous and it's dark and it's damp and you're following a line, you don't know where you're going. I mean, that's the perfect example of what that place is. And there is something at the end, but it's more like getting there and just kind of realizing that you can handle it, that you're still alive, and that you will continue to be, and in this sort of like deep, rich compost of darkness, something new will be born. But that takes a lot of trust. It takes a huge amount of trust and faith and a little bit of hope, but also, more importantly, a real comfort with hopelessness and uncertainty.
Right. Which is not something that a lot of us have ever experienced until we're in that place. And I think that's why so many people die by suicide in that time, or the suicide ideation start to come in, because you start thinking it must be over. Like, I've never experienced this before. Wanda just said, I remember looking in the mirror when I lost my cousin who was more like a brother, saying out loud, what the F? What the F are you? Not the Wanda I always knew. It was totally a dark time for me. I changed my workplace, which was a good move, but his loss is still very felt. So there's somebody else who had like a full like identity crisis, right? In that place.
Yeah.
Changed their career. And I'm just looking up in the comments because, hi Gina. Somebody said, what's the best way for us to support our friends grieving in both death and a separate friend who's going through separation, divorce? I want to be supportive and loving. I know you're going to talk about this on your video tomorrow, but can you address this a little bit? Like, if we're not grieving, but we are actually supporting somebody who's grieving and experiencing loss?
Yeah, well, I mean, the main thing is just to show up. I mean, this is just the classic thing, is that people show up maybe once or twice, but they don't keep showing up. It's continuity over time. One of the most common complaints and real heartbreaks and associated losses for grievers is when their friends and family members sort of, they came in, they hit them with a couple of lasagnas, and then they vanish into the ether. And I think to ask people what they need, to not wait for them to actually say that they have need, because this is the other thing that grievers hate, is when do I actually have to step up and say what I need? Like, will nobody just come and just either ask for it or just make some assumptions and give me something? Although that's kind of tricky too, because there's a lot of people that don't want people to intrude. So you just have to ask and keep asking.
Well, one thing that Shannon Miller says that I think is incredible is she said, when people would say, just reach out if you need anything, she never did. Because
no,
you can't give your hand if you're drowning, right? The people
that's
on
exactly
land,
right.
The people on land need to be reaching their hand out and saying, take my hand. And so it was the people that continued to show up and to be there.
That's right.
That would phone her intuitively and say, I just get a feeling that you need somebody right now, because they might see something, or just intuitively, and she would just they would just sit on the phone with her just while she cried, while she
that's beautiful,
holding space, right? So
yeah, I love that image of the hand above the water, right? You might not hear a voice. If the voice is submerged in pain, you might just see a hand, and it might not even be able to wave. It just, at this point, just may be there. Right. So this is the thing about grief. When people are really swamped by deep loss, when you said the word intuition, I really like that. We really do have to employ, and we're called to employ, our deepest human skill of attentive intuition and empathy, and to step forward and not wait for all the right signals, because waiting for signals is usually a defensive structure. Sorry, everybody, but most people that kind of are waiting for a signal or waiting to heal are actually quite uncomfortable with what's happening.
They're like, hopefully she won't call.
Yeah, kind of. And we all come by that honestly, but there's nothing. Today I had an uncomfortable moment on the palliative care, where I work, and I'm pretty comfortable around death. But I came out of a room and there was a young woman who had lost someone very close to her, who was just kind of leaning against the wall, and I'm I said hi to her, and I said, you know, what's going on? She said, well, you know, I lost my sister, and I was just like, she's, you know, probably my age, and I didn't have a whole lot to say. It was just a really weird, funky little moment where something unspeakable was going back and forth between us, because there was no way for me to make that better.
Right.
I reached out and I touched her shoulder, and I felt like that was weak. Like there was just nothing to be done, right? And this is the thing about grief. It makes us encounter moments when there's nothing to be done, and everything that we do feels weak and paltry. And so what do we do? In moments like that, it's very easy to shirk back, right? Like it's very easy to go, well, I'm just going to move into a comfortable, more secure place where I kind of know what all my actions mean, and I can be more confident. The thing about being around death all the time is it keeps reminding me how little I know about anything. Because this was just one of 1,000, you know, connections I can have during the year, and even still, it was so fresh and so raw. I could see it in her eyes that it threw me back on my heels.
Wow. Well, I think actually that is beautiful, because God forbid that we ever like numb ourselves to the human connection to grief and loss and death. You know, a person dying, especially somebody who you love right in front of you, I can't imagine. I have not experienced that. Mm-hmm. And I know that a lot of the people on this Facebook Live have, and I have no concept of how that feels. And so I think it's good that even after all your thousands of deaths, that you still are taken aback, because it means that you work really hard to be present in that, you know, and that's what makes you so special and so good at what you do. But yeah, I know it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but also, yeah, Marlo, I mean, it also is about the fact that it's just so raw and real,
right,
that I think it transcends whatever ego or whatever you think you got, whatever I thought I had walking out of that room. Right. It completely was just like, whew.
Yeah.
So this
no
is
training trains you for that.
It you know what, it doesn't, because I'm telling you, like in that moment, I just felt raw. I just felt useless, and it was okay. I can stand in it. If I have training, it's just the ability to stand next to that cold breeze and go, this is what is right now.
Right.
What is that all my rational, reasonable, all the words I've collected over the years, all my empathic facial gestures and everything right now, all that stuff is on the floor at my feet, and all I'm facing is death and sorrow, irremediable. And in that moment, that's kind of the dark. That's kind of like getting close to the dark night, is being able to sit in the real moment without immediately running and trying to control and trying to feel comfortable. Like, it's okay if I'm uncomfortable, but I'll tell you, in that moment, I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't, and I don't think she was either. I don't think either of us were. I think it was just this kind of interesting moment. So I think that as we describe a dark night, it's easy to romanticize it. There's nothing glorious or romantic about it. It's more like those Thai kids in that cave. That's closer to it.
Yeah, for me, it looked a lot like sponge baths in a porcelain sink, trying to figure out how it was going to like disappear without hurting anybody. Like, it's not a romantic, sexy place. And the people who have been there for any length of time and had any glimpse of it understand it can also be slightly dangerous, you know, because depending on who we have around us. I mean, I'm blessed that I have an incredible family and friends who did the reach out thing, right? But not everybody has that, and and that's unfortunate. And so hopefully these kinds of conversations let people know that they're not alone, and you know.
There's a really great. I wanted to read you something, Marlo, that it's that the Oscar Wilde wrote when he was in prison for being a homosexual. He was in prison for 2 years just for being gay. Wow. And he didn't know if he was ever going to. What's that?
Wasn't that long ago?
No, and it was he. I mean, you know, he was an ingenious soul, very bright and a real dandy, right? But they threw him in chains, and he didn't know if he was ever going to come out. So his whole being was all of a sudden locked up. This incredibly effusive big guy was all of a sudden locked up, and somehow or another he got paper and he wrote while he was in jail. And this is one of the things that he wrote, and I think it kind of gives us a little bit of insight into the darkness, into this what he calls the one season of sorrow. And he says, "For us there is only one season, the season of sorrow. The very sun and moon seem taken from us. Outside the day may be blue and gold, but the light that creeps down through the thickly muffled glass of the small iron-barred window beneath which one sits is gray and niggard. It is always twilight in one's cell, as it is always twilight in one's heart. And in the sphere of thought, no less than in the sphere of time, motion is no more. The thing that you personally have long ago forgotten, or can easily forget, is happening to me now, and will happen to me again tomorrow." I really love this idea that
The contrast, right?
yeah, and that he's always twilight in his heart, and that this thing, that when we're in the dark place, he says, the thing that you personally have long ago forgotten, he says, that's happening to me every day. I'm going to wake up with it. I can't escape my own sorrow. And I think this is the experience of being, of grief in a way. It's the inability to wake up and just escape it. Anytime you can't just get out of it by your own, bootstrapping,
Right.
you're kind of there.
Right. Shannon talks about the something millisecond, not the magical millisecond, but it's that millisecond between sleep and waking. And it's the moment when you forget.
Right.
So it's the moment that for 1 second, everything's normal. And it's like that.
Yes.
That little millisecond of time when you're just waking and you're like, oh, right?
Right.
She talked about that in her talk in Calgary, that moment, if we could just put that in a container and access it, and this is something that she has learned to do, it's a skill that she is able to go into that millisecond and pull that forward whenever she needs to kind of go back into that, like, that joy place. But it takes effort, and she practices it, and she shared that from the stage, because sometimes you really have to intentionally find that moment and go into whatever memory or whatever feeling takes you there. But had we asked her if she could have done that 4 years ago, I don't know that she could have accessed that, right? Because she was in the very darkest night of her soul. This is something that she's come out of 4.5 years later.
Yeah.
Right. So again, just tools that you can try to implement, are they going to work right away? It just depends on where you are and your own personal story and your own personal struggle, right?
Yeah, and also it really depends on whether you are resilient, which means whether you have the capacities and the belief within you that whatever comes your way, that you can meet it and either grow or transform, change or handle. And we're all somewhere on that spectrum, right?
Right.
And the idea, I think, dark nights are training us to handle more all the time.
Right.
Each time we go into one, small or large, we get a little closer.
Janine said it's called the blissful millisecond. That's exactly what it is.
Blissful
Hi, Mom.
millisecond.
Mom's here. So
hey, Momski.
We have a few more minutes, so I want to kind of like just either open it up. Anybody have a question for Roy here? Put it in the comments. But if you don't have a question for Roy, so the book that you're reading, The Dark Night of the Soul, what is the purpose of this book? Is it to give people, is it like more of an education about that place, or is it how to get through it? Like, what is this book feeding you? What is it doing?
Well, so the soul in terms of Thomas More's conception of soul, and that's based on James Hillman's conception of soul, which is kind of based on Carl Jung's conception of soul. So it is like
all the thinkers,
yeah, like these guys are all connected. So it's kind of like watching them all think with each other. And soul, in their idea, like dark night of the soul for them isn't really necessarily a substance in us, but it's a way of experiencing, a soulful experiencing. So I think what he's doing is making a case for being more soulful, more willing to actually engage in the complexity in the substantial experience of these dark disassembling times.
Right.
And so what he's trying to do, and he sort of uses myths, Greek myths specifically, but he uses a lot of examples. Oscar Wilde's is one of his examples, for instance. That particular quote's not from his book, but his book sent me to Oscar Wilde to do a bit more reading on him, and I found that. So yeah, he likes to try and look at the way not for us to triumph and be heroic. He doesn't even like the word growth, Marlo. He thinks the word growth could be a bit too heroic, and I've really thought a lot about that. Seeing as my website's called Grieving.
Growth. Well, I mean, just because it's a thought doesn't always mean it's right or wrong. Right?
Well, no, exactly. And I actually think, there's nothing more natural than growth. And I think if you think about growth, makes a lot of sense to me. But we can get caught up in this idea of growth as being sort of like, I'm going to grow, I'm going to make it, I'm going to read another book, and I'm going to be bigger and better and wiser and smarter and more beautiful and healthier, and my brain's going to be bigger, and I'm going to be able to meet all my problems and meet out every human being, and ascend and get on top and get to yes and all that stuff, right? And he's saying, like, all that stuff, that's the work of the ego, and that's the work of spirit. Right. Down below, man, it's all humility, and it's all broken, tumbling over our ass over tea kettle. And in that place, he's saying, in that soulful place, there's a richness there that if we can really understand it, we can actually start seeing our problemed life as being a real source of wisdom, right? And even in relationships, Marlo, he likes to, he would even say, when he sees people who come in who are going through marriage problems, that if he talks to them long enough, burble these like dark characters,
sure.
He talks in one chapter, he talks about these two very brilliant, one was an architect and one was an artist, and the architect, and they had a very unemotional relationship, and the architect, I guess, like started having like some crazy sexual affair with this like basically street person. And, it was just like, what's up with that? It didn't make any sense whatsoever, but something, these things burble up and, of course, like destroy our lives.
Radical.
Right, totally radical. But there was a part of her, it's kind of like that, you coming out of the basement there with a new hair. Like, sometimes, like, there's something inside of us, things inside of us, parts of ourselves that get called out. And these parts, if we don't look at them and if we're not gentle with them, and if we don't stop to reflect on them, we'll just think that they're bad. And then we got to get rid of them. Like, that affair was just me behaving badly, as opposed to, there's something in me that's hungry to be alive.
When we talk about growth, I mean, when I think of growth, the first thing that comes to mind when you said, well, growth is natural, is a tree.
Right.
If a tree has no roots,
right,
the tree has no grounding. And so as we grow, so do our roots. The bigger the tree, the bigger the roots. So
I would agree.
I actually think that in order for us to grow, it's almost like the meme. I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where it's kind of like looking at an iceberg, but you're looking at it from like above the water and below the water. And above the water, there's this little tip, but under the water, there's this massive.
Yes.
It's like that. In order to show the growth, there's this huge, all this stuff going on underneath that has to happen in order to feed. Like, the roots are the lifeblood of the tree. And so are our problems. They're the lifeblood of our growth and of
absolutely.
Right?
That's right, Marv. And the thing is that, but the tree, when we think about trees, we don't think about the roots.
No.
You go walk in the forest, like, you don't see the roots, you don't think of roots, but, it's underneath our feet. And so I think his whole point is, there's this other side of ourselves that is below our sort of conscious awareness that we don't really like to go down into. Exactly. But all myths and all Bible stories, right from, Jonah and the whale, going into the whale, going under the water, being swallowed up into the darkness and appearing on the other side.
Yeah.
There's all these stories, are stories of going into the darkness. Even the Christ story, right? If you think about it, he's Christ, he gets crucified, he goes through really bad stuff, he goes to hell, has the worst possible trip ever. He spends 3 days down in Hades hanging out with the devil, I guess he conquers them, and then he comes up, ascends, and he's like this new creature, right? He walks through walls. He's levitating. He ain't even close to being human anymore. I mean, that is behind him. That's the story of Into the Underworld and Out Again. And this is the great myth. And these myths, we don't sort of match these myths. These myths match us. In other words, those stories are written because this is who we are and how we are. That's Moore's whole point in that book.
Right. Well, I mean, it sounds like a book that anybody who is interested in this perspective needs to read, just because it's just another perspective. And, you know, there's a lot of use of the word soul, you know, it's getting thrown around a lot. And I think that it's really great to do some thinking about what it really is, and what it represents to us, and what the meat is, right? So I feel that this soulful experiences, and even seeing these dark nights and the deep roots that give us all of the shots, right? All of the arrows come at us in the form of these problems, that those are the things that kind of fortify our foundations. If we can make it through, and, you know, kind of drudge along, eventually we'll see something.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you, Roy, for being here this evening. I love this conversation. I think it's really interesting. Deanna says, thank you so much for the amazing video. I find it so informative. Thank you. And I can't wait to check out Roy's site. Yeah. Okay. So before we go, can you please direct people to where they can find more of your videos and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I make videos every so often on a website on Facebook. It's just a Facebook. It's not a website. It's just on Facebook. It's easy to find. Roy Ellis, Grief and Growth. I make videos from time to time about topics that I'm thinking of. And I write sometimes there. I do a little bit of blogging. I'm trying to increase my content there. So hopefully keep an eye on there. There'll be more stuff. And in the new year, I should have a website up.
Okay.
And then then the games really begin.
Well, no, it's great that you have content. It's great that the content that you put up is relevant. You know, that's the most important thing. And Roy and I, just to kind of drop a seed, Roy and I are going to be running a grief retreat together in the Mayan Riviera in April. I believe it's the 27th to the 3rd of May, something like that. We have been dialing in. We have a location. We have a schedule kind of already done, and we are just getting some more details finalized, and then we're going to be putting that out to the public. And there are limited spots, like under 20. I think we might be doing like 14 or 16. I can't remember exactly. Yep. So if you're somebody who would love to spend a week doing a deep dive into this kind of stuff and really understanding your grief process, and possibly just being present in it in a different location for 7 days, and just, you know, hanging out with Roy and I and feeling however you want to feel, and maybe coming home with some tools or I don't know, a community, for sure. You know, please feel free to follow Roy and myself. Put both of us on See First in your Facebook community, so that you know when that promo goes up, you have access to it. Because I have a feeling those spots are going to go really quickly, especially with, you know, his massive community in grief. So thank you so much. Deanna says it would be amazing. It absolutely will. Thank you, Roy, for being here I think this is your 3rd year on the 12 Days of Divine Inspiration. Something like that.
And I'm still not divine. What the heck?
We're working on it.
Keep it coming.
Keep it coming.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, Marlo. Love you. Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.